Welcome to the Dork Forest. Jackie and her pals will never bore us. Shameless confessions
about our obsession
will make us laugh and smile. So let's explore the Dork Forest and dork out for a while.
Hi, Jackie Kashian here. You're about to listen to The Dork Forest. You know the websites, dorkforest.com, thedorkforest.com. JackieKashian.com has the links to everything. Merch, the new album, my other podcast, videos of me doing stand-up. Dorkforest.com has all the notes and the video that you can watch of this show. Traditionally, I tell you to donate to the Dork Forest, but it is November and December. I ask that you donate to a local food bank because you should. I don't know, you should do it all year, but what the heck? If you are donating to the Dork Forest using the PayPal link that gives every month, you can turn it off and turn it back on. You can do a matching to your food bank and donate to me as well. But all the money that I get from the donations from November and December, I'll give to my local food bank. And so I will get all of that sweet, sweet karma. Other than that, you can buy merch. You can, for Christmas, there's new t-shirts and stuff. But whatever it is, the Dork Forest, super fun, always available. I'm sure there's things I'm forgetting to say, probably Bandcamp, but let's get into the show. Hey, it's Jackie Kashian. I'm actually in my living room on the old Zoom kit. Don't get used to this sound quality, guys. Don't do it. Because I'm going to go back to wanting to do videos, but because of the new album, super swamped, and have been meaning to do this for at least a month and a half. Welcome back to the program. The love of my life, Andy Ashcraft.
Aw, well, thanks for having me back.
Thanks for being in my living room.
I'm almost always in your living room.
You are, because it's your living room, too. Andy Ashcraft, as Rangers may or may not know, is married to me, and I'm married to him.
It's true. We are married together.
Hell has frozen over, and you have a podcast now.
I do have a podcast now. We're like 32, 33 episodes into this podcast now, too.
Right, and it is called Ethics and Video Games?
Ethics and Video Games, yep. My colleague, Shlomo Sher, who teaches the ethics class at NIFO, where I teach
New York
game design.
Film Academy.
New York Film Academy. He teaches an ethics in video games class there, and we became friends, and I have subbed for him a couple of times in his classes, and he wanted to do a podcast and invited me to be a co-host.
So you are a co-host in a podcast called Ethics and Video Games,
yep,
which is available everywhere people get podcasts, much like this one.
That's right. And if I can plug his book as well.
Oh, please.
I believe, you know what? I can't plug his book quite yet. It's not out.
Okay. So look forward to listening to Ethics and Video Games and finding out that Shlomo has a book.
Right. And then you could also read about ethics and video games.
Right. And Shlomo was on the show and did Sandcastles,
right? Yeah.
He was a Sandcastle dork, and it was a great episode. You may remember that. So, speaking of sand.
Oh, yes. Ooh, nice segue.
The worst. But there was talk. So, there has been a lot of chatter about LARPing.
Yes.
And I mentioned on a previous episode that you ran or co-ran or ran with other people.
Yes.
LARPs.
I did.
And many of them. Many. And one of them was a series based on the Neil Gaiman comic book series.
Yep.
Called Sandman.
Yep.
And it isn't the Sandman, it's just Sandman. And now there's going to be a TV show. And so a live action role playing, which is what LARP stands for. And I always describe a LARP as a costume party with game mechanics. Does that seem about right?
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah.
You have a character
that you make,
or in some cases, somebody has pre-made characters for you. I mean, there's a variety of ways of handling this, but the way that we handled it, the way that we always did it in the Enigma, the Science Fiction Club, we started doing this many years ago. Before the term LARP even came about, we were calling them LIGS, live interactive games.
You were calling them live interactive games? LIGS?
LIGS.
Oh my God, I have to write down the term LIGS.
It didn't take.
It didn't have any legs.
It didn't have any legs.
LIGS didn't have legs.
But LARPs have legs.
But LARPs, for some reason, had legs. It's even in the new Hawkeye.
That's right.
Right. So
it has become a thing.
It has become a thing. And there's two kinds of LARPs, right?
Right. There's combat LARPs. In which case, in which you might wear armor and beat each other with sticks.
Right. It's boffer LARPs, right?
Buffer
Is that a
LARPs,
term?
yeah, buffer LARPs. So
Okay.
you'd have basically, padded foam covered sticks and wear armor and do that sort of stuff. And we did a few of those, but ultimately we didn't like them as much as we liked what has come to be called
Yes.
chamber LARPs.
Chamber.
Chamber LARPs.
I thought they were called theatrical.
Or theatrical LARPs, either
Okay,
way. Chamber
yeah.
LARPs tend to be a little bit smaller than theatrical LARPs, but it's sort of the same thing.
The one LARP that go ahead.
And the difference is no combat, no physical reenactment of combat. If there's combat in the game, it's done through some sort of game mechanic.
Okay. Right. Like with the Deadwood LARP that you ran, it was cards.
That's right.
And is it sometimes dice?
Well, we did a few with dice early on, but we found that was clumsy.
Okay.
We've done a handful with cards.
Right.
Most of them have been done with cards, and then we've done a bunch with sort of rock, paper, scissors style hand gestures.
Okay. Oh, that's right. You're actually very good at rock, paper, scissors. It's really weird. I've played rock, paper, scissors with you, and it's really, really odd.
That's because I know how to do a bomb symbol, and the bomb beats rock, paper, and scissors.
And
you don't know how to do the shield symbol, which protects you from all of these things.
Which is the only one. Are those real, or did you just make those up?
No, they're the mechanics from our rock, paper, scissors LARP combat situation.
Oh my God, that is outstanding. We will speak
Which
more.
is the what we used in our Sandman games.
Okay, so the first Sandman game, what year-ish?
So the first Sandman game, oh my gosh.
Would it have been 90s?
Yes.
Okay.
92, maybe?
Before 1995,
Oh, yeah.
to your knowledge.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah.
believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was run by a friend of the show, Robert Hurt,
Robert Hurt.
and Aaron Vanek. Who
Has also been on Talking Cthulhu. Is
right.
due back, but doesn't drive.
Right. And so they ran a game based on the Sandman storyline that has been collected and is called Seasons of Mist.
Okay.
So in Seasons of Mist,
Right.
the premise is, and it was perfect for a LARP. It was a perfect LARP premise. The premise is Lucifer has abandoned hell
Seasons of Mist, yes.
and given the key to dream. And
Who
it's
is
not
the
and it's
Sandman.
not a gift. It is a bit of a curse.
Right.
He did not give it with good intent. He gave it with, and you now have to deal with this.
Right. And
Horseshit.
And this horseshit is horrible.
Right. And so a variety of other deities and beings come calling to the dream, the dreaming where Sandman lives,
Yep.
basically petitioning for the key.
Okay.
And that's the perfect premise for a LARP. So we all got to play different gods.
Okay.
Robert Hurt was playing Sandman, Morpheus.
Okay.
And
Aaron Vanek, who did he play?
I think he was just running. I think he was just running the game. I don't think he
Okay.
I don't remember if he had a character or not.
Okay.
And so we all played various different characters, either from the book, because there was a variety of characters that showed up in the books to come
Right.
and petition for the key, or other characters that we had made up, or from other mythologies,
From
or
other
whatever.
pantheons and
Yeah.
stuff, right?
And so
how many people played in that one?
Oh, probably 40.
Right. I remember why we're doing this. There was an episode of The Dork Forest that would be an excellent companion piece to this episode of The Dork Forest, which was entirely about Sandman. And it was about the different storylines.
Right.
And so this one, Seasons of Mist, was the first LARP that you were in it. You didn't run this one. This was run by Robert Hurt and
This
Aaron
was
Vanek.
the first Sandman LARP. We had done many other LARPs before this.
Right. This was the first Sandman LARP. Right. And who did you play?
So, interestingly enough, Steve Mandel,
Yes.
friend of the show,
DC, that is a DC Dork Forest, yes.
and I played ourselves, who had become gods, in Scott Martin's.
Previous LARP?
Yes. Well, previous tabletop game.
Okay, so you had taken characters that you had created in an RPG tabletop game.
Who were based on ourselves.
Who were
Because
based on Andy Ashcraft and Steve Mandel.
In that story, we had been sucked out of our normal universe and into this fantasy universe, and we had to deal with the fact that we didn't know how to do stuff.
Right.
But we did know how to do stuff. We knew how to do like everyday stuff.
Right. You know how to answer phones.
Right. And because we were not natives of that plane of existence,
that realm,
we were therefore gods.
Oh, because you had showed up.
Right.
And everyone that shows up that isn't from there is kind of gods.
Right.
Okay. So you played yourselves in the first Sandman LARP.
Yes.
As gods.
Yes.
And
that's a nerdy thing to say too.
There's an episode of Bones that could be just written about those two characters.
That's right. And it was Steve Mandel and I, and so we were having a blast.
Well, the time of your life, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Steve Mandel, one of your favorite people to hang out with.
Yes, absolutely.
Rivaled only by other man that lives 20 other people. But
yes, he's
I'm thinking
right up there.
Other Phoenix dweller, Chris Winslow.
Chris Winslow. Yeah. Who was also, I believe, in that LARP.
Oh, really?
Was he?
So,
he was in the game. He was one of the gods with us.
Okay.
He was also a god in the tabletop game. I don't recall if he was in the LARP or not.
Okay. So we have a Sandman LARP. There's 40 people.
Yeah.
Where do we have this event?
So it is being held at the there's a rec center on campus, on UCLA's campus.
Oh, okay. So you were allowed to use.
As a club, we were able to rent it out.
Oh, fair enough. Wow. All right. So there's a rec center. And so 40 people show up. Are there? Yeah, where do you park? No, I'm just. Where, are there snacks?
Well, it's UCLA. Yeah,
What's happening?
What was
Somebody had something?
Goldie Hawn had that joke way back in the 70s about how she would have gone to UCLA, but she couldn't find parking.
That is very funny, and that is a joke that you would only hear or know as if you went to UCLA.
That's right.
But it feels super Los Angeles-y because it's a famous person saying it. I've broken character. Now I'm weeded off because I love Goldie Hawn so much.
It's
anyway,
true.
So 40 of you pad over, and in costume?
Oh yeah.
Full costume.
Oh yeah.
So you
costume
two,
for me was easy.
Yeah, you and Steve just got to dress like yourselves.
In kind of fantasy-ish garb,
okay.
Right? Because we
shoulder pads?
No. Although it had been just the 80s, so
exactly. So, so Robert Hurt plays Dream.
That's right.
And
he's sort of our host. He is our host for the evening. And
with LARPs, there are often, when you make your own character, and if a character is made for you by the game master, by the person running the game,
right?
There are sometimes goals, right?
Right. So here's how we tended to write our LARPs as a group, as a club. Mm-hmm. What we tended to do is say, here is the premise. Pitch character ideas to us. Pitch who you want to be.
Okay.
And then people would come up with character ideas, and we'd say, that sounds great. Go write a background and write what you want to do. And so they would write a page, usually just a handwritten page on loose leaf note paper. Maybe, this was the early days of email. So it might have been an email when we printed out on our dot matrix printers.
Right.
Exactly.
Yep.
And
owned almost exclusively now by car rental places. Anyway, so you'd print out the idea.
We'd print it, and then the people running the game would take all of these. There would be a deadline.
Yeah.
A month or two before the game.
Okay.
To give us time to collate all these characters.
Right.
Talk about how they connect to one another.
Okay.
And rewrite them so that they connected together in interesting ways, so that you would know things about the people in the game that you knew.
Okay, so it would give you sort of backstory, and
that's right.
Sort of like when you look at a D&D, like the one of those books, it gives you a lot of sort of too much info about the monster.
Right. And we were always very conscious of how much info could be too much info.
Good.
So you might have a paragraph or two about there was general info that everybody knew.
Right.
And then you if you had a faction, you might have some faction info that was everybody that in your faction knew this.
Okay.
And then you would have your character information, which was just here's what you know, or here's your deal. Mm-hmm. And we would try to echo what the player had written
Right.
prior to just to make sure that they were heard.
Yep.
And we didn't want to rewrite their characters for them. But we did want to connect them to everybody.
Right.
Or connect them to enough people to make the game interesting. Mm-hmm. And then we would send those back out to people.
Right.
And then also have a copy for them at the game itself, because people forget stuff.
Right. People always leave things at home.
Right. And then we come up with some simple game mechanics. And at this point, we had come up with the rock, paper, scissors variation. And I can't remember where we had picked that up from. It might have been picked up from the Assassin's Guild at MIT.
Okay.
Who had sent one of their members had come to grad school and had joined us.
Okay.
And he had brought some game ideas, because we had started doing our LARPs basically as, hey, let's take our tabletop role-playing games and make them live, make them parties.
Okay.
The Assassin's Guild had come at it from a different direction. They had been playing Assassin on campus, which is that game where you get somebody else's name, and then you have to hunt them down and kill them. I'm using air quotes.
Finger quotes.
Because you would either you would shoot them with a dart gun,
right.
a Nerf gun,
or tag. It was some sort of tag. It was
some sort of tag, and then if you killed them, you got the name that they were carrying, and now you continued on until there are only two players hunting each other on campus. This is a game that causes paranoia.
Yeah, it does.
And what they did is they took that game, and they said this would be more interesting if it had characters.
Okay,
and factions.
Okay. Oh, sort of not just teams, but literally like you're James Bond.
Yeah.
You're Elvis Presley. Whatever.
So they had run a game. Oh no, they had run a bunch of games, and then this guy's name was Harry Tuplitz. He works up at Caltech now, I believe.
Okay.
And he had come to us to come to grad school at UCLA and had joined the club, and he had brought this information and brought his style of gaming, and we were doing our style of gaming, and we sort of colluded and put together a game and I think that the mechanics, that rock paper scissors mechanic, had come from them, but I'm not completely sure of that.
Here's what I may have to make a TikTok video. Rock paper scissors, bomb, shield.
Yep.
What does a bomb look like?
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up is the bomb?
Thumbs up is the bomb.
And what is the shield?
The shield is flat palm up.
That makes so much sense. I'm going to stop you right here and tell a little story about when we first were playing at just board game night over at the over with Judy and Phil. And Judy was telling a story of some LARP that you had both been in and that you had sex.
Oh, yes.
And I did not know that
we simulated sex in a LARP.
In a LARP, which is done with
hook our pinkies together, as we are doing right now. You and I.
To hook pinkies. Here's what Jackie Cation didn't know: that you weren't the kind of people who, if you had sex, you would just talk about it over a game of apples to apples. And so I thought,
well, exactly, we kind of are.
Right. And I told some weird story.
We just don't have a lot of sex with each other.
There was that. And then, so I told some weird story about actually having sex. And I felt really, I don't remember which story it was, blessedly. All I remember is sort of the silence. And then Judy explaining to me that it was pinky sex in the LARP. And I was like, okay. All right, I'm going to go die a little bit over here.
And yet it's all worked out.
And it's all worked out. Here we are, years later. Still married.
We went over to Judy and Phil's house last night. It was nice.
Last very night where you played a game.
And you slept on their couch.
And I slept on their couch because I couldn't face it.
Right.
I had to sleep.
You had to sleep. And it was fine. And it was adorable, in fact.
Oh, well, there you go. Let's get back to Sandman LARP.
All right. So the rock, paper, scissors mechanic.
How was it used in the Sandman, that first one?
So as a character, if you're familiar with D&D, for example, you've got a character sheet and it's got a bunch of stuff on it.
Right.
With a LARP, you also have a character sheet and it's got some stuff on it. It doesn't have as much stuff because we wanted to simplify it down. You have, basically you have some number of hit points.
Okay.
And you have some number of shields that you may use in a single combat.
Okay.
And some number of bombs that you can use in a single combat.
Okay.
Sometimes we would call them cheats. Cheats or bombs is the sort of the same. And so those were your stats. And you could use rock, paper, and scissors as much as you like, unless you had some sort of limitation, in which case you might not be able to use rock, paper, and scissors as much as you like. And that would be a top secret thing that you would not want anybody to know.
That you had some sort of
disability
in the game
right.
that would not allow you to use rock, paper, scissors.
That's correct. Or rock, paper, or scissor. Like we would say, like one of your mechanics might be...
one of your mechanics doesn't work because you don't know what scissors are.
Right.
Or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Holy smokes.
Right.
All right.
So if somebody ever figures that out, then they can just beat you down.
Every time.
Yeah, every time.
Yeah, and then you would be dead.
Right.
Because hit points are health.
Hit points are health.
Shields are defense.
Yep.
And bombs or cheats are attacks.
Yep.
Okay.
And they beat rock, papers, and scissors and other bombs.
What other things happen at a LARP that are not attacks? Like there is.
So you might also have, and in the case of Sandman, people had magical abilities.
Okay.
And we did those a variety of different ways, and each even though we were using that same rock, paper, scissors mechanic throughout all of them, we changed the way that magic stuff worked.
Okay.
To try to limit as much as possible how much you needed to go to get a GM to figure stuff out.
Okay. Oh, right, because
that would just drag.
Because you could just do it together,
right? Exactly.
And you have access to your own sheets, and then you
don't need.
And nobody's cheating.
Nobody's cheating on this stuff.
It's not right. This is just fun.
This is all just fun.
Right. And so, when would you go to a GM? Is when it got.
Well, yeah, there might be something you needed to adjudicate.
Okay.
Like, hey, I want to do this thing, and I don't know how.
Okay.
I want to do this. I want that something that nobody anticipated.
Right.
And so you'd go to the GM and you say, I want to do this thing. And they would either say, you can't do that. Or they would say, sure, you can do that. And here's what happens. Or they might say, sure, you can do that, but you need to get 6 people in the same room together, all doing such and such.
Oh, wow. That's kind of cool too.
You need to do a ritual.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
You have to get 6 people together and do this and chant for 3 minutes.
So what was the purpose of this first Sandman?
So the purpose of the first Sandman was to work out who ended up with the key to hell.
Oh, because in the books it was Dream, but in the game it could have been anyone.
Well, in the books it starts with Dream in the books and
oh, that's right. And he
ends up giving it to the angels.
That's right. He gives it to the angels.
Right. But in our game, and this is where things get really interesting to me. Mm-hmm. in the game, because
welcome to the Dork Forest with Andy Ashcraft.
Right? I mean, it doesn't always go the same way. And so it ended up going to Aphrodite.
Oh.
Goddess of love.
Kiss, kiss, kiss.
Queen of hell.
Queen of hell. Goddess of love, Queen of hell.
And now Queen of hell, because she has the key to hell. And now now the Greek pantheon has that real estate.
Right. Oh, wow.
And some
Who
other
was
things
playing Aphrodite? Do you remember?
Yeah, Deborah. Deborah Levine.
Oh, okay. Oh, there you go. I remember.
Yeah. I don't think she's been on the show.
No, she is not.
She could be. She's
hundreds of people. That you know, specifically that you know, could be on the show. I know a lot of dorks. Yes, it's one of the great things about us. Anyway, go.
So not only is that but that's not the only thing that happens, because we have 40 players in the game, and they all have goals, and they're all achieving things, or not achieving things. But one of the things that also gets achieved is that there were some fairy folk in the game.
Yep.
And they achieved their goal of bringing magic back to humanity.
Oh, really? Okay.
And after the game was over, I was thinking about that, and I was like, that's fascinating. I'm fascinated by the idea that now we're in a divergent reality, a Sandman, a non-canon
Right.
Sandman reality.
Yeah.
That's different.
It's been created.
That's been created by us.
Yeah.
And it kind of fits. It feels
worked.
it feels like Sandman.
Right. It still feels right.
Right.
So is that what inspired the second game?
Yes. So I then approached Robert and Aaron, and
Right.
they said, "Sure, go ahead and run another game.
Do whatever you want.
Do whatever you want."
Take that real
Which
estate.
I mean,
here's
I have
the
to
key
say,
to hell.
And so I have to say at this moment that I am enormously grateful to them on this, because it's led to my professional life.
Oh, right. Which, by the way, Andy Ashcraft has a podcast called Ethics and Video Games.
We'll get to that.
And you also make video games.
Yeah, and I make video games, and I make board games, and I make tabletop games, and all
Yeah.
that. But it all came about because I ran these Sandman games,
Right.
And I'll tell that story a little bit later when we get to that in the timeline. But it's
Right.
But literally, I would not have the job I have if I was not running these Sandman games. At that time,
Okay.
I would not have the job I have. Who knows what I'd be doing?
Right. So second Sandman game, though,
Second Sandman game.
did you run it with Aaron and Robert?
No.
Okay.
No, they wanted to be players.
Oh, okay. They just wanted to play.
Right.
Okay.
I
What year
ran
is it now?
It's probably a year later, 2 years later.
Okay. Still early 90s.
Yeah, still early 90s.
And what is this one based
So
on?
this one is Sandman 2,
Right.
A Game of You.
A Game of You. YOU?
Yep. Which is
Okay.
another one of the Sandman stories.
Okay.
And then in the comics, this is the Sandman story about this small portion of the dreaming, a little island that has been taken over by a character called the Cuckoo.
Okay.
And the cuckoo is basically, the cuckoo is like the cuckoo bird that lays its eggs in other people's nests, and
Oh, right.
so on a grand mystical scale, this is basically happening in the comics. And
Okay.
then there's this whole story that's going on about this island where this is happening, and it introduces the Salian and the witch character that shows back up in a lot of the other Sandman stories, and
Okay.
it's a great story.
Yeah.
So I nicked the name because it's a perfect name for a game.
Yep.
And I told the story, and we told the story. Who was running that one with me?
Because it's the second of 4.
It is the second of 4.5, because we
Right.
did like a little half game as well.
It was not Lee?
I don't believe so. I believe it was Leslie and Deborah.
Okay. So the three of you are running it.
Yes.
And
I'm sort of leading the design on it.
Right.
And so in this one, it's set at a newly established mages club, sort of a high society club
Okay.
in New York City.
Fancy. The Knickerbocker Hotel, 1895.
Where they're holding a party, and because they're magi, they're newly crafted magi from because magic is now back in the world.
Oh, right.
And it's also taking place on this island, and the island is this island in the dreaming, and this island has been superimposed over Earth.
Okay.
And so the gods are involved in this now, and fairy folk are involved in it because they brought magic back to the world, and
Right.
and there's basically the barriers between the worlds are starting to get super thin.
Right.
In the Sandman comics, they were just talked about. They were spoken of as just thin places, but the whole world was becoming a thin place.
Okay.
And so they needed to sort of strengthen the barrier between the worlds. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime,
Yes.
there was a secret mechanic of the cuckoo.
Okay.
And so what we had done is we had created it was basically just a little notebook, one of those flip notebooks.
Yeah, spiral.
A spiral bound flip notebook, a little 3x5 sized flip notebook. And it started with one player, and it would say, "You've been possessed by the cuckoo.
Okay.
Do this thing, and when you do, give this book to the GM."
Okay.
And so once they'd done the thing, then they came to us. We took the notebook back and said, "You're no longer possessed by the cuckoo."
Right.
And then we would give it to the next person that the cuckoo possessed.
Did you rip the notepad?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So they didn't know what the previous person had done.
Right.
Got it. But that is an awesome thing. And you would just give it to random people?
No. There was a plan.
Okay.
There was a plan. In some cases, it was whoever, like whatever the goal of the last person, whoever they did it to or did it with would get it.
Infected with
Right.
the cuckoo.
Right.
Yeah.
And so a bunch of things were going on in that one, and ultimately, the fairy folk were doing their thing, and,
Sure.
and
Are all the same people playing, kind of reprising their roles?
a lot of them are reprising their roles.
Okay.
But
Everybody wants to
but
play.
there's always new players that
Always
pop
new
in.
players, always people who drop out, right?
And always some people who drop out, and so we have this game,
Right.
in the Mage's Library, and that one was actually played at the Adler's house,
Okay. At Judy's house.
Yep.
Judy and Phil's house.
Yep. and Phil actually helped me write. He wrote a program in HyperCard. So this is again 1990s technology.
What is HyperCard?
HyperCard was sort of an early. It was almost kind of like a PowerPoint kind of thing.
Okay.
But it was a little bit more useful than that. And what it was is it was a computer that represented the library and dreaming in the
Okay.
in Lucius's library in the dream.
Okay.
In the dreaming, and you could go up and you could look up books.
He actually, it was like on a Mac Plus or something?
Yeah. It was
Okay.
it was on a computer.
It was on a computer you could actually type in.
You could actually type in. There was only a few books that were important.
Right.
And so if you happen to know the name of a book, you would get information.
Right.
But if you didn't know, and you could just browse the books.
Right.
And we had created this template of book title creators. It was basically a random book title creator
Okay.
that would create random books,
Yeah.
book titles, and you could just browse the book titles forever. And it was awesome.
That is awesome.
And we also had, because different parts of the house were different areas of the world. So we
Right.
had, this part of the house was the dreaming, this part of the house was fairy, this part of the house was the afterlife.
Right. Sort of like what we did with the guest room was the brothel in Deadwood.
Exactly.
And the garage was the bar.
And so certain people could go from place to place, but other people had less ability to do that.
Okay.
And if you died, you went to the afterlife, and you could still play in the game.
Right. But
just
you
had
were
to
in the
play-
dining room.
You were actually in that room above their garage.
Oh, fair enough. Which was not condemned at that point?
It was 30 years ago.
Right, that's true. It was 30 years ago. So in the ensuing 30 years, there has been. It is not safe. Do not go to the room above.
It's currently not in the best of conditions, but
But
back
at
then
the time,
it was fine.
and that was the afterlife.
Right, and we had actually hooked up. We had unplugged their cable,
Okay.
and we had plugged in cameras in the afterlife and in the dining room
That
to their cable system.
you guys were such nerds. This is so
and it
awesome.
it was the Seance TV station,
Oh my gosh.
so you could have conversations with people in the afterlife.
Oh my gosh. I'm falling in love with you again. This is so dorky. I love it so much.
Super dorky.
I love it so much.
And they were so elaborate.
And
there's no way I have time to do anything like that.
And yet,
And
you wish you did.
I wish I did.
Kind of.
It would be fantastic.
It would just be fantastic.
We could do so much more now too.
And what was the premise of this one? What were you trying to do?
So the premise was, well, different people were doing different things, but
Okay, of course.
but the main thing was the boundaries between the worlds was dissolving, and that needed to be dealt with.
Okay.
And then the secret thing was the cuckoo was also trying to take over the earth. And so that also needed to be dealt with. But other people had other things going on at the same time, and the fairies were still doing their crazy fairy stuff. And one of the crazy fairy things that they did was that they colluded with Pat Mannion, who was playing Swamp Thing.
Interesting.
And-
Why wouldn't he be?
And Brian Tatosky, who was playing Kyle Rayner, Green Lantern.
Okay, the Kyle Green Lantern?
The Kyle.
Not
Green Lantern.
Hal,
Not
or-
Hal. Kyle.
Okay.
And well, this takes them several games to get all the way through this, but I'll just lay the groundwork here. They start colluding,
Okay.
and because they're all connected to something, they're like they want magic to happen. They're connected with the green and the greening and the green magic and Kyle Rayner's Green Lantern magic. So it's all.
Nice.
It's all sort of
because Swamp Thing is all about the greening and the land, and Green Lantern is all about the Green Lantern and the green magic that comes out of that lantern.
Yeah.
Hence, they have that in common.
They have some things in common, right? So that leads us to Sandman 3, Brief Lives.
Okay.
So in Brief Lives is a story of Morpheus going to and looking for his strange son, Orpheus.
Quick question.
Yes.
Backing up to Sandman 2, does Robert Hurt play Morpheus in Sandman 2?
Of course. He plays Morpheus throughout.
He's
Morpheus. On board with this. He is Morpheus throughout the whole thing.
I think he's done 5 episodes of The Dork Forest. I think the Rangers know that Robert Hurt is on board. And astrophysicist, Photoshop genius, Robert Hurt, artist. And also, turns out, LARPer.
That's right.
So, okay, so in what's the third one called?
So the third one is Brief Lives.
Brief Lives, which is based on
the story Brief Lives in the comic books, in which Morpheus goes in search for his son Orpheus, who is his estranged son.
Okay.
Who is it's complicated.
Please.
But the important part in the comics is that Orpheus is a head in a box who can't die.
Wow.
And
I don't remember. I read these.
Yeah, but it's been years.
Right.
And Morpheus has to release him. He can't get any release. Like he can't die. But Morpheus can kill him.
Oh.
And does so because he asks.
He's like, please end this madness.
In this, right.
Why is his head in a box?
Well, because I'm not sure. It's unclear.
Okay.
I'm sure my memory of it is unclear. I'm sure that our listeners have a more clear
recollection go back and listen to the specific Sandman episode about the Dork Forest.
Right.
We might have mentioned it.
And
anyway.
So Sandman kills him. Mm-hmm. All right. So in Greek mythology,
yes,
it's really, really bad
to kill a family member.
Sure.
Tick-tock, here come the fates.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And so that, in the comics, that releases the fates, and then that basically becomes the end of Act 2 of the entire series of the Sandman comics. Now it's just a matter of time.
Now it's just a matter of time before the fates get him.
Right.
They're going to get him.
Right.
And he is he's all black-robed, and then at the very end of the Sandman series, it is a new Sandman.
Right.
In white robes.
And I don't remember a whole lot about this game.
Okay, the third one?
The third one. I mean, there was lots of stuff going on. It was we played it back up in the rec center.
Okay, brought it back to the rec center.
I remember that Pat Mannion had created this vast tree growth organism that was him.
Right, because he was Swamp Thing.
Because he was still Swamp Thing.
Right.
And so he had created this big paper mache and wire tree that he was inside, and you can go talk to him. And it was astounding.
Did he spend, because these games last 4 to 6 hours, right?
Yeah.
Did he stand in that costume for 4 to 6 hours?
A fair bit of time was spent in that costume, but he didn't have to stay. He didn't have to stay there. Sometimes he could have. Because as Swamp Thing, he could dissolve basically and show up somewhere else.
Oh, okay.
And so, but yeah, he spent a fair bit of time in the costume. People go talk to the tree. But the one thing that we did do is that we made sure to have the scene in which Morpheus talks to his son, and I played his son in a
box
with my head, like I was under a table.
Oh, like in the Addams Family.
Yeah, exactly.
Where you were just the hand, but you were just the head.
And so
Robert Hurt talks to you at your head in a box.
Yes. So I got to play Orpheus for a scene.
Well played.
And and it went very well.
Sure.
I think Robert was very pleased
With how it went.
with how it went, and he did the same thing that he did in the comics. So he
sort of played
he
it.
releases me into death, and so that sets us, of course, because that's the end of Act 2 in the series. That
Right.
becomes sort of the end of Act 2 in our series as well.
Do you remember any other things that happened at that game?
No,
Not particularly.
not particularly.
I would like to back up again briefly now that Pat Mannion's Swamp Thing costume has been
and that was
mentioned.
Lee and I running that one.
Right. And Lee, you and Lee ran that one. So going back, several questions. Is Steve Mandel still a god dressed as himself in any of these subsequent?
No.
He is not. Next question.
Yes.
Other people's costumes. Do you remember any particularly nice costumes or pieces? Because the thing about LARPing that I kind of love sometimes is the costumes.
Right. Well.
Do you remember that Sesame
Robert
Street
was
LARP
always,
that we did?
Robert's Morpheus costume is on point.
Robert Hurt nailed it.
Uh-huh.
Not shocking. Shocking no one.
Right.
He did it right.
Pale makeup, pale skin makeup.
Yep.
And and frying out his hair to to get that Morpheus look. And then the robe.
Dragon Ball Z kind of spiky hair.
Yep. I like to think of it as blue steel.
What's that? What's blue steel?
It's from that really, really dumb movie about the male models.
I don't.
Zoolander.
Oh, Zoolander. Oh, there you go. Right, which you made me watch one time, and I was like, no, I get it. And you're like, see, they're dancing with gasoline.
Orange mochaccino.
Okay, so Robert Hurt did good.
Robert Hurt did great.
Pat Mannion had a great costume.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember there were like all of the people who played the various Endless, and the various Endless are all in because people
Who played
want to
Death? Did any?
I don't remember who played. So different people played Death in different.
Oh, right,
ones.
and Desire and Destiny. And,
Yeah,
because the Endless
weren't many-
there's 9 of them, right?
there's
6.
7.
Right. So Dream, Death,
Desire.
Destiny. Well, there's 4.
Dismay. It's not dismay. It's
Despair?
Despair.
Despair?
And let's see, Death, Despair, Dream, Destiny, Destruction.
And Desire?
That's sick. That's all 7 of them.
All right. And so...
And different people played them at different. I mean, Robert was always Dream.
Yep. Because I just remember that sometimes the costumes are made by the people who are playing the characters, and sometimes you can hire people to make those costumes, and people do.
Yeah.
They're like, I need help.
Yeah, although nobody did that in any of ours. This was too early.
Too early.
Yeah.
In the process.
And people were still super psyched about making their own costumes.
Right, and you had a sewing
And we were
machine.
all also in our 20s in the early 90s, and so
Right.
none of us had any money.
Right, there was no money
There was no money.
buying of costumes. You were like,
Right,
you have a sewing machine, I have a glue gun. Let's put this
exactly,
up.
exactly.
And then Phil Adler knew how to program.
And Pat Mannion, who loved to just like make elaborate stuff.
Right, paper mache.
Oh my gosh.
Hilarious.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then that led to 3.5,
3.5.
which is the sort of which
An
was
inter-
which was sort of a LARP and sort of just a storytelling show.
Oh.
Because in this one there was no combat mechanics.
Okay.
It was in the comics. There's a series called the end at the end of the universe.
Of the world,
no,
maybe?
World's End. World's End.
Yeah.
World's End N.
Oh, that's
And
it.
it's basically there's some sort of big reality storm, and there's an inn, sort of on this cliff, stuck out in the middle of nowhere, and people from all different times and places and worlds ended up coming into this inn for shelter.
Right.
And they
Cain
tell-
and Abel?
And they tell stories.
Right.
In the comics, there's just like a 6 series where different people are telling stories
Yeah.
about themselves and about other things and just stories.
It's a storytelling in.
Just a storytelling in.
And that's the coin, right?
and so-
That's how you have to pay for things there.
Yeah. And so that's
Okay.
what we did. We basically...
You
we
had a
basically-
storytelling
We had
party.
a storytelling party in character. So we
In
had
character.
people were still pitching characters. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people played the same characters that they'd been playing for a while. Brian McInnes had been playing Loki the whole time.
Okay.
And now he was playing Loki, but maybe he was Coyote.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Did we know?
Do we know? Did you ever find out?
Oh, we don't. We don't ever find out.
Okay.
It's, and so people still have goals that they're
Right.
trying to accomplish, but everybody also has a story they have to tell.
Okay.
And so we had like blocks of time in 2 different rooms where people could, like, we had a schedule for when people were telling stories.
Right.
In these 2 different rooms. So basically 2 different stages.
Right.
And then blocks of time in between where people were just interacting with one another in character.
Trying to achieve their goals and
Trying to
just
achieve
hanging
their
out.
goals and just hang out and
Going to the bathroom.
like embarrass each other.
Getting a
and,
soda.
Yeah, doing, and they all had things that they were trying to get accomplished.
Right.
And that went very, very well.
Right.
That
sounds like a lovely evening, quite honestly.
It was a lovely evening, in
It
fact.
sounds like a really nice night.
In fact, it went really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
And we were very...
Was that Lee as well? Did you run that with Lee Bennett as well?
Yes, I believe I did.
Okay.
And it was at Pat Mannion's house.
Oh, okay. There you go. In the shadow of Magic Mountain.
In the shadow of... Yeah, when he and Eleanor lived up in the shadow of
And is it still 30 or 40 people hanging out?
this one was a little bit smaller. I think it was just 30, 25 or 30.
Yikes. Okay.
I mean, it was...
Plenty of people.
Plenty of people.
Yeah.
And I think maybe not everybody had to tell a story because we just didn't have enough time.
Right.
So we had a certain number of time slots for storytelling.
Right. And how long were the stories? Was anybody timing the stories?
Oh yeah, they had to be
They had to be tight?
They had to be 3 to 5 minutes.
Okay.
They were short.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah.
That's really
Quick-
for the best.
quick
as well.
stories,
Yeah.
right.
Please.
Right.
Thank you.
Yes. But we didn't. What we didn't do is we didn't edit any of the stories. We didn't actually
Right.
have them submit stories.
Okay. And give feedback before they would do a second draft. You were just like, yeah, we've been
Right.
doing this
Just-
for 15
we've been doing
years.
this for a while. Tell
Yeah.
a story, and a lot of them were great, and a lot
Yeah.
of them were not great, and
Yeah. Everybody got to tell a story.
and there was it was just a really, really cool, lovely evening.
That sounds great.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Which led to the next game.
Right.
And all of this is before. No, because I think the next game was the game that I took part in.
That's right.
And we were dating in 2003.
Right.
So
a big jump of time had happened because I
Right.
had moved away and then come back, and so I'd moved away in '97 and come back in 2001, and then Lee and I wanted to write this and do this.
yeah,
And then basically finish the series
finish the series because this one was based on
on
The Wake.
yeah,
Okay,
yep. So this one is The Wake,
which is also in the stories.
right? Which is also in the comics. Everybody gathering to, because now the fates have killed Dream, and now people are coming, and it's basically his funeral in some sort of timeless place.
Right.
And people are telling the story of various stories about him.
Okay.
And that's what the comic, and it's sort of another series of stories in the comics. So one of the plot lines that I had followed, so now we're going back to Sandman, or we're going back to Kyle Rayner and Swamp Thing and the fairies.
Right.
What they managed to do over this time is they managed to take Kyle Rayner and turn him into an 8th Endless
Oh,
named Design.
that's right. So the Green Lantern is now an 8th Endless.
Right.
Okay.
And so so we had never had the story about the fates, so we'd never had the story of Morpheus's death.
Okay.
So
Even though he
Yes.
was killed in the LARP.
right.
Okay. So, but the Fates didn't
Orpheus.
show up.
Orpheus was killed, his son.
Oh, right. Okay.
But we had never played out
the Fates killing
Morpheus for the crime of killing his son.
Got it.
And so what this one was then about was it was a wake, but they didn't know for whom. So one of the Endlesses died because there's too many Endless. There's now 8 Endless in the world.
And the numbers are off.
And so we actually we borrowed a coffin.
Yeah. I remember that coffin.
Right. And we knew, and so we basically
hired a theater.
We rented out a theater.
Because now it's 2003.
Now it's 2003.
Or 4. And everyone has jobs.
Everyone has jobs.
And so now you're like, it's going to cost $40 to play this game, and we're going to just rent a theater for the night.
Well, and it was a theatrical production, right? So because we had these scenes. So I asked a handful of people. Not everybody in the game wanted to do it or had time. But there was a handful of people that I was like, I want these people to write a scene.
If they were willing, you were like, would you write a scene?
Right. That and then we would have these moments, these periods of time in the game, much like the storytelling game, where you would go and watch the scene. That was what was happening. There was a scene being played out.
Like they were short one act.
Yeah, they were short one act.
That's
scenes.
right. I told the previous episode of the Dork Forest. I told about how that there were tiny like one act plays.
That's right. And so a variety of people had written a bunch of one act plays, and in this case I had edited them.
Okay. You saw them just to make sure that they were short.
Just to make sure they were short, and they were saying what, and there were things that we could actually do.
Right.
On stage in this little black box theater. Right.
And it was and they were death scenes? Were they death scenes? Not all of them.
Yes, they were not always scenes showing the death of somebody, but they were scenes about the death of somebody.
Okay.
And they were scenes about the deaths of the various different Endless.
Okay.
And we also had this overly ornate, elaborate voting system, this voting mechanic that was based on the 5 stages of grief.
What? How did it work?
It was complicated, but at different times, different people had more voting power based on how we sort of associated them with the stages of grief.
Wow. Holy smokes.
And so there were various moments during the game where people were asked to vote who was dead.
Right.
And
how did that work?
It worked out okay.
Right.
There were, at the end, a couple of days later, there were a couple of complaints, and we might get to that, about how that played out.
Right.
So again, we did it exactly the same way we normally do it. We say, here's the premise, call for characters. A lot of people played the same characters they played before.
Robert was in this one.
Robert was in this. Brian Tatosky was the Kyle Rayner Green Lantern design character.
Okay. I thought he was Loki.
No, that was Brian McInnes was Loki.
That's
Brian
right.
Tatosky was designed as Kyle Rayner.
Okay.
Right. And so it ended up the way that comics ended up. So they ended up.
Oh, they voted for Dream.
Well, no, I should say they voted design out. The new guy didn't last.
The new guy didn't last. They killed him.
Didn't last, but it ended up being kind of a pretty close race between him and Dream.
Okay, because some people want to play out the actual story.
Well, and everybody had all their character motives were more important than what their sort of meta motives of like, no, this is the way the story should go.
Right.
Everybody had different character motives, and that's sort of where we failed, because what we didn't do, while we did make it, we were completely agnostic about who was going to be in the coffin at the end.
Right,
as game
matter.
Designers, we didn't have a horse in that race at all. But what we didn't do was make sure that the various different factions of people who wanted different people dead were competitive.
Oh, okay.
So there was a faction of people who wanted death dead.
Yep.
And it turns out, just because of the way that we let people create their own characters and define their own goals and do all of that, we didn't think about it. It just never occurred to us
Right.
to try to make these factions somewhat equal or somewhat competitive with one another.
Okay.
So it turns out, because there was only like 2 people in the game who wanted deathbed.
They just weren't enough.
It was a goal that they could never achieve. And
And they didn't have a mechanic to recruit.
right.
Okay.
Not really. I mean, there were a handful of people that could be recruited,
Right.
but that was going to be a hard sell.
Right. And it was and you think of that as sort of a failure of game design at that point.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
because it led to them having a not so good time.
Right. Then and that's the whole purpose of all LARPs.
And that's the purpose of the whole thing, is for everybody to have a really
for
good
each
time.
person to have a good time.
Right. And
Yeah.
and one of the things that you want to, in order to have a good time, you want to feel like you have a chance of success.
Right.
And at some point during the game, they realized they did not have a chance of success,
Right. And then bummed them out.
and it bummed them out.
Yep.
So that's not great.
That's not great.
But still, there was like 60 people in that game.
Right. There were so many people in that game. That was the one that I witnessed.
Yep.
Because I asked if I could come and watch, and you were like, it's not really done. And I was like, well, what if I do?
But it's not that it's not done. It's just that we've had people do it before, and they don't know what's going on. They
Yeah.
can't figure anything out. There's no way for them to like connect to anything going on.
Right, it
Because they're
isn't
not
super
part of
fun.
it.
Yeah.
They're just a fly on the wall watching a bunch of people have weird conversations, and it doesn't mean it can't like nothing means anything.
Well, this being described to me in this moment actually helped a great deal because in the 11th hour, Maria and I were in charge of catering.
right.
We were
and then
like-
also Maria got to play in one of the
I also got to
you got
play
to
in
play.
one.
Yeah, that's right.
But I was not good. Maria was amazing. But Maria was also a better actor than I was because had been doing it longer and had had some training, any number of reasons why Maria Bamford's going to be a better actor than me. And she was cast quite well. So Jim Desire? He wrote it, I think, right?
I believe so, yes.
And so Jim Keller
Yep.
is
Friend of the show?
friend of the show, I think.
Has he
Could
been
be.
on? He could be.
Oh my God, both of them, and his husband Chris. So the crazy thing. So I remember this so distinctly because I think I was just used as an extra to deliver notes to people. Like
Yeah.
I had to deliver a note to
throughout.
Odin.
I don't remember if you wanted to be like on stage. At
Like
any
I think
point.
I was too nervous about memorization, and Maria was like, "Screw it, let's
Right.
give
They
it a
were
shot."
short, and they were short again. I was
Right.
I was keen on making sure that they were short.
Right, and so Maria was in one of the plays.
Yes.
And it was The Death of Desire.
Yes.
And she played Apathy.
Right.
That is all I remember, and I remember
the character that they brought to kill Desire was Apathy.
Do you have? So we're pushing an hour,
We're pushing an hour.
Do you have plans?
The oven just beeped.
right? Do you have a right? So
But what I do want to say is this is the moment where I say, it was somebody who was playing in one of these games.
over the
She
decade.
was playing the Queen of Fairy. She played the Queen of Fairy all the way through.
Right.
Kirsten Haglett,
Okay,
Aaron Vanek's wife.
she was the one who got you the
Yes,
first job.
yes. She happened also to be.
I knew I liked that woman.
Yes, she happened to be working as a temp receptionist at a game company, a video game company, and she was talking about how excited she was about these games.
Right.
And they in 1994.
Right.
They said, well, we're looking for a game designer. And she put me in touch with them and got me that that led to my entire career.
Right. Right. Talk about a happy ending. I did not know it was Kirsten.
Yeah.
Yeah. That
And
is
so
outstanding.
I owe those 3 people so much,
Right. As do we all.
as do we all.
Because it's 4, 5 Sandman LARPs that are we learned about LARPing. We learned about Sandman by Neil Gaiman. Beautifully drawn, And if you want to get into LARPing, know that it doesn't have to be boffer LARPing.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be run around on the field and hit each other with sticks. It can be
You
something...
don't have to throw beanbags and yell,
It could be
Fireball.
something small. It also doesn't have to be 60 players, too. It can be a small cozy LARP, as they call them.
They call them cozy LARPs?
Cozy LARPs, which is just maybe like 4 or 5 people in a room, or maybe,
Right.
a small group.
A small group that, much like you'd gather for a board game, you're just essentially creating your own fun theatrical moment to recreate something you genuinely love, sort of like writing fan fiction.
Yeah,
But it's a game.
exactly.
Thank you so much for being on the Dork Forest, Andy Ashcraft.
I feel like we barely scratched the surface.
As always.
We could talk way more. I could go into lots of game design talk and do that, but I felt like you wanted more story.
Well, I certainly wanted to know this is a nice overview
Yeah.
of those particular LARPs and that particular IP and all of that. Mm-hmm. And so I think you'll be back on the show.
There may be a day.
Rangers, so you guys.
So I have my own LARP now.
What is it?
I with hookers and cocaine. No, it's it's ethics and video games with my co-host Shlomo Sher.
Yep.
And we talk about all kinds of ethical issues, both in games and in the industry and around games and
Yeah. And so you have guests sometimes, and
we have a lot of guests. We like to have guests.
You like to have guests, but you always have
really good guests this last week.
topics, and it comes out on Mondays or Tuesdays.
That's a good question.
Right. Anyway, so it will be linked, and so ethics and video games with Andy Ashcraft, Shlomo Sher,
Wherever podcasts are
happening.
you'll
Right.
find it.
Do you guys do a video on YouTube usually?
We do. Yeah.
Okay.
So also on YouTube.
Also on YouTube. This episode will not be on YouTube because we live together. And so I didn't have to Zoom. So we're just standing next to each other.
And we didn't have any makeup or hair people here, so.
And Andy Ashcraft, you also have the Hero Instant, or just Hero Instant.
Right, it's true. So
It's in
coming
beta.
soon, a sit-down tabletop superhero role-playing game entirely of my own design.
Yep, and I am in 2 different versions of it.
Play tests. We've been play testing it throughout the COVID thing over Zoom, and they've been going great.
So if you want to noodle around that, you can go to theheroinstant.com.
That's right. It's really cobwebby right now, but it'll get updated at some point.
There you go. Thank you for being on the show. And Rangers, you know the rules out there. Take care of each other.
My hat, my hat, my hat. They're dancing around my hat. My hat, my hat, my hat. Well, what do you think of that? If it looks like a Mexican hat dance and it sounds like a Mexican hat dance, it's most likely a Mexican hat dance. So take off your hat and let's dance.
Yay! Oh my God. Why don't we just call that as the end of the show?